What's up everyone, China Cycling here, aka Joe, aka the electric bobsleigh. Today we're looking at bottom brackets and checking out the difference between a $50 Topeak Ninja bottom bracket and a $300 Hambini Engineering Racing bottom bracket. Let's take a look. So first we have the Topeak, no it's not the Topeak. So first we have the Token Ninja. Token, a Taiwanese company I believe, and this is their Ninja option. It actually won a design award, the Red Dot Design Award I believe, for how easy it is to install. And the main reason for that is because the two halves just screw into each other. So you put one side in your frame, the other side in the other frame, and at first just start twisting them by hand, and then use a standard Shimano tool to just drive them in, and it installs itself essentially. Whereas totally different kettle of fish is the Hambini Engineering BB86 Shimano Racing Edition bottom bracket. This is the bee's knees of bottom brackets, if you will. Comes out to about $300 US price point. Now, on the Token Ninja website, they don't list what bearings they use. They just class them as premium, and they should be good enough for what you're doing. This bottom bracket actually came as the free bottom bracket with this frame here, the Windspace SLC. So most people buying these frame sets from Windspace, obviously they're going to be building up their own bike, and so they want something that's pretty easy to install themselves at home. So the Token Ninja makes perfect sense from that point of view. You don't need a bearing press, you don't need anything fancy, just a standard Shimano bottom bracket tool. So here I've got one of their Super B options, but yeah, you get the idea. Lots of people make this tool, little teeth, just engage on this guy, and then boom, you can get some leverage and install it. But as I say, yeah, installation super easily. First, put one side in each side of the frame, and at first just start threading together by hand. And then as it gets closer to the frame, it'll start to drag on the frame, and at that point you can start using the tool to tighten the outsides, and it'll start to pull itself into the frame itself. I usually alternate between different sides using the wrench. The only thing you have to be careful of is just how small the flange on this bottom bracket is. You've got maybe like a 1.5, 2 mil flange here, and so trying to get the tool to sit exactly on here can be a bit of a pain, so some care is needed. And then finally, when the lip or the flange of the bottom bracket sits flush with the frame, I just give it one little bit of a twist, and yeah, you're all done, all seated and nice. Give the bearings a quick spin to make sure they're installed properly, and yeah, install your cranks as you would usually. Once your cranks are installed, time for everyone's favorite, the good old-fashioned spin test. Obviously not very practical for the real world, but everyone likes it. Another alternative is raise the leg of the crank arm to the 3 or the 9 o'clock position and let go and see how easily it falls back down. I've been riding this very bottom bracket for a few months now. That's why it's covered in grease, and I've had no creaks from this one. But obviously creaks can take a while to develop, so you know, my sample size of one and my mileage of probably less than 1,000 on this one isn't a very good indication of how long this will or won't last. Another advantage of this bottom bracket removal is just as easy as installation. Literally put the tool on one side and start turning, but don't remove all the way. When you've turned it about halfway, start removing the other side, and then remove this side all the way, and then you'll be able to remove this side. If you just remove one all the way, the other side will still be stuck in the frame. So remove them bit at a time, and it'll push itself out. I removed this one a few moments ago, and yeah, super easy job. Now in the future, whether you can change these bearings or not for new bearings, I'm not sure. Token don't seem to be making this very easy for maintenance. I don't really want to push these out in case I trash them on this fairly new bottom bracket, but yeah, you get the idea. But a $50 for the whole thing, you could always just change the whole thing when it dies. Weatherproofing looks decent. Obviously you got caps over the bearings, and no other obvious gaps where water could get in, so yeah, I guess weatherproofing will be good. Just don't go pressure washing it. So for 50 bucks, or for free in this case, I think the Token Ninja is a good option for the home mechanic. You know, super easy installation, super easy removal. It doesn't creak, or at least not on my case in my frame, and no bad things to report. The fact that the left and the right bearings are connected in the middle by this thread, and it's a pretty fine thread, means it should also help with alignment of the two bearings. And it's misalignment of these two bearings that often causes your creaking or your fast wear on your bearings. So better alignment of these bearings is going to give you less drag on the bearings, smoother rolling, and also added stiffness. But if you like it stiff, you need to get your hands on Hambini's big black one, the Racing Edition bottom bracket. The Racing Edition is heat treated and hardened for maximum stiffness. If you've been living under a rock and you don't know who Hambini is, he's an aerospace engineer slash aerodynamicist slash 5-year-old YouTube whiz kid who started actually making these bottom brackets as a way to fix faulty mass-produced carbon frames. So because carbon fiber frames are laid up by hand, and because of the heat cycles involved with the curing of the carbon, etc., and the resin, it's harder than you'd think to keep a round hole in your frame perfectly round. So when the frame comes out of the mold and it cools down or whatever, there's a chance that your perfectly round hole can shrink in size or even turn egg-shaped or what have you. Obviously, different manufacturers have better production qualities and better quality control to catch the bad ones, but if you go over to Hambini's channel, you'll certainly see a lot of those that don't catch the bad ones. So if the two holes in the frame for the bottom bracket aren't perfectly round, or even if they're not perfectly aligned, you're going to have very poor bearing life, and you're also going to have extra drag on the bearings. So the Hambini Racing Edition bottom bracket, essentially what it does is ensures that both of the bearings are exactly the same angle and exactly the same alignment, and they have no added drag on them. Similar to the Token, but whereas the Token has the thread in the middle and is not as stiff externally as this is a one-piece design, precision machined from aluminium to really ensure that your bearings are absolutely perfectly aligned. You're also going to be adding stiffness to the area of the frame that's taking all the torque on your pedal. So obviously when you're on the pedals, the bottom bracket of your frame wants to twist, and that twisting will also misalign the bearings. So having this in there is going to add extra stiffness to that area of your bike. But $300 for a bottom bracket, I mean, where's your money going? Let's have a look. So if we take off these end caps, so if we take off this cap, we can see inside we actually have Japanese NTN bearings, super smooth. I think these probably retail for about $60 per bearing. So you've got about 120 US dollars worth of bearings in there alone. These plastic caps just clip back in. Secondly, where's your money going? Well, so the bottom bracket claims to be manufactured to aerospace standards. Now, this is the kind of BS that you hear a lot of in the marketing in the bike industry, but maybe with Hambini, he actually knows what he's talking about because he actually works in the aerospace industry. But if only I had a way to prove that this was built to aerospace standards. Yo, PT. Yeah, man, I got a job for you. There's some bloke in an orange boiler suit making bottom brackets on a Disney princess blanket and claiming they're built to aerospace standards. Yeah, I know. And he's French. Now, joking aside, I did actually send this very bottom bracket over to Peak Torque for testing. And he has the videos going into all the details about just how precision engineered this thing is or isn't. I won't give out any spoilers here, so after you finish this video, you can go check out his video on that there. If you don't know who Peak Torque is, he's another YouTuber slash engineer, or engineer slash YouTuber, I should say. He's kind of like Hambini, but without the swearing. If you think that's a good thing or a bad thing, go judge for yourself. But anyway, a top guy, and he had a look at this, and he gave it the once over in his lab to see how well it's made. So how about installing the Hambini bottom bracket? Well, it's certainly not as easy to install as the Token one, but some things you just can't cut corners on. So the whole unit has to be pressed in from the drive side of the frame. which is a bit different to usual BBs where obviously one half goes in one side and one half goes in from the other. It does come with an adapter to fit perfectly on the shell, so you're pushing the shell and not the bearings. This is my bearing press that I usually use to install bottom brackets on bikes. And the problem with this one, it's just not big enough to install the Hambini bottom bracket. So when the bottom bracket goes in, essentially on the side of your frame, you have to have enough thread to go through the bottom bracket and through the frame to be able to push the whole thing in. So if you have a standard bottom bracket press like this, it's not going to be long enough. However, I made a trip down to the local hardware store and picked up this 1 meter long of M5, M6, I can't remember, M5. So I picked up this 1 meter length and a bunch of screws and washers and stuff for about 60 cents. And I'm in China, so it's a bit cheaper, but hey, it won't cost you more than a few dollars. And then so obviously if I throw a spacer on here, then I can just put on the adapter, which will then go onto the, if I can find the hole, there we go, which will then go on the bottom bracket, put it through the frame, put the standard bearing press on the other end to pull everything in, and you're done. There's a full installation video over on Hambini's YouTube channel, but it's not rocket science. So one nice thing about this design is you can replace the bearings with the shell still in the frame. So again, pull off these caps and then you have access to the bearings, and then just push out the bearings as you would usually with a bearing press. And then you're good to change the bearings for whatever bearings you want to use. Obviously, if you've got such a high quality bearing shell, you're best off using some high quality bearings in there too. However, if ever you do need to remove the bottom bracket shell, uninstalling the bottom bracket from the frame is a bit of a pain. Don't ask me how I know, but this was in the frame a few hours ago and now it's out. The biggest problem is once it's in the frame, you need a big sleeve to go on the outside of the frame to be able to pull the bottom bracket out into. Usually on a bearing kit, the sleeve is only going to be about yay big. And so you're going to need a sleeve that happens to be big enough for the whole thing. So this was the sleeve in my bearing set, and obviously you're not going to be able to pull the bottom bracket all the way through it. But I looked out, I found this carbon tube that someone had been testing paints on, and I cut a length off because it fit perfectly, and I mean perfectly, into this sleeve. So I could essentially put two sleeves together to get the clearance I needed. This carbon tube though was obviously just used for testing paint colors, and it was paper thin, so I wasn't sure if it was going to take it, but it did work in the end. I'm sure if you do need to remove it, Hambini sells his removal tool. I didn't have the removal tool, I just had the small adapter, which goes in this side. Once the cap's off, you put this in here, and that can push the whole thing out. But yeah, having a tall enough sleeve might be an issue, but hey, there are ways around that. But $300 is a lot of money for a bottom bracket. If you're watching this channel, you probably like a bit of a bargain, and $300 is probably a lot of money to you. It's a lot of money to me, it's a lot of money to most people. Now, I have no problem with Hambini charging $300 US for this. The low quantity he's making these in and the quality of the manufacturing and the bearings included, I think the price is justified. So yeah, if you install this bottom bracket, yes, your bike is going to be stiffer. Yes, you will be going faster for the same output of your legs because you'll have less drag on the bearings. And yes, you can sleep easy knowing that you've got a very well machined component inside your bike. If your bike is already built up with high-end components like Dura Ace or SRAM Red, then I think you've already made the commitment to having a high level of equipment on your bike. If that's the case, I definitely think the bottom bracket isn't an area you should overlook. There are gains to be made with a bottom bracket, and it doesn't have to be ceramic. Of course, don't just take my word for it. If you go on over to Hambini's website or anywhere on the internet, there are plenty of reviews of people who've used this thing, people who've had problems for a long time with creaking bottom brackets and going through bearings really quickly. and they swap to one of these and their problems go away. I'm fortunate that my bottom brackets on the bikes I ride these days don't creak. My old Specialized LA Sprint used to creak quite a lot. I'm building up a new one, but that's BB30. Obviously, I won't be able to use this, so I might have to buy a BB30 version of this as well. So, as the old adage goes, if it's not broke, don't fix it. If you've got a cheap $50 bottom bracket and it's doing you fine, your bearing is lasting a long time, and you feel like the cranks are spinning freely, then sure, just keep on going for it. But if your frame has some issues and you go through bearings very quickly, or you're an elite level athlete and to you every watt and every amount of stiffness does matter, then you might be in the market for the Hambini bottom bracket. It'll probably be the most precisely manufactured component on your entire bike, and you can sleep easy knowing that you never have to worry about bearing misalignment. So, if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. And don't forget to go over and check out Pete Talk's video he did on the bottom bracket into all the details about tolerances and all that juicy stuff. But yeah, that's all I've got time for today. China Cycling out.